Kendrick got at Drake so hard with Not Like Us that it resulted in Drake filing petitions, which could lead to lawsuits against UMG, against iHeartMedia, against Spotify, lawsuits everywhere. This is crazy. This is something like I've never seen before. And listen, Not Like Us was a moment. And even before we got that, the tracks going back and forth was pretty wild. And, the fact that there's now litigation or pre-litigation filing is absolutely crazy. And I want to get into the two claims that Drake is filing. The first one has to do with the, artificial inflation of Not Like Us. And then you have the defamation claim. So I want to welcome you back. If you've watched one of my videos before, if you haven't, my name is Jamahl Kersey. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I've been practicing law for over 15 years. And on this channel, we're breaking down legal concepts so you're in the know. So, man, when it comes to this whole thing, I just think that Kendrick went at this in such a more strategic way than Drake did. And I'm not going to break down the whole beef, but I think like going into the couple steps before Not Like Us was absolutely crazy. Because I can remember being in this very room watching the Family Matters video and being like, man, like, wow, Drake put something, it was pretty dope together. Like, I'm a Drake fan. I like Drake. I like Kendrick Lamar. I prefer Kendrick Lamar over Drake, but they're not really comparable. Their styles are so different that, it's not really a, apples to apples comparison, if you will. But man, Family Matters, like when you go back and listen to it, that was supposed to be, the nuclear bomb, right? That was supposed to go on and get it done. And you can even hear, you can hear in his tone throughout the rap, just the swag that he approached the track with that, man, I'm coming for Kendrick's throat and this is going to be the end. And even, towards the end, he talks about, cause it's 3-part track. And when he's in part 2, he's talking about, I'm going on vacation and y'all better know, not to mess around and put the boy's name in your song or whatever. And then it flips into, and then he's playing around on that, melodica, and it's like, man, he really thought that this was done. He was going to be able to ride off into the sunset and that was going to be that. And rightfully so, right? With some of the accusations and bomb droppings that he let off in that song, you would think that was going to be done, right? And he obviously alluded to, he alluded to Kendrick putting hands on his wife or her putting hands on him, and maybe one of his sons or one of his kids is the father's Dave Free, who is his boy, and that's like. Listen, when you go there with somebody, diss track or not, you need to be prepared for the absolute worst when you are going at somebody's family in that way. And I just think, for whatever reason, Drake thought this was a game, and Kendrick obviously was just playing on a completely different planet from him. Because, again, when you have Family Matters drop and what that was supposed to be, and to have that stepped on in less than an hour, right? Like, you don't even have an opportunity to let that thing breathe. And less than an hour later, you have the darkest, sadistic, most twisted, scary beat, right? Alchemist, and you have Meet the Grams, a letter to Drake's family and then to Drake. And man, that track's almost hard to listen to, right? I've gone back to it a few times, but it gets a little difficult to listen to just because of how ugly it is, right? And then, so a lot of people were like, yo, man, this dude's done. Like, how do you come back from that? Because it just went beyond what a diss track normally is. This is like, you are a horrible human, and I can't stand your very existence, on a rap song, right? And, then you have the very next day, it's almost like the dancing on the grave, so to speak, with Not Like Us coming out, where you have something that's more just a certified West Coast club hood banger, right? And the reason why I say that is the interesting thing is that was a bop in and of itself. That was gonna have legs and take off. That thing was out of here, right? So obviously if there was some sort of artificial inflation behind that, right? Whether you have bots or, negotiating streaming deals to make it less expensive for them to get it out there. I don't really know anything about that, but that's what Drake is essentially alleging, that, UMG and these companies went ahead and did backdoor deals to make Not Like Us blow up more than it should have otherwise. But I can tell you that song would have blown up anyway. I don't know if it would have, went out the stratosphere like it did, but it definitely would have blown up. I mean, you had, the West Coast has just been kind of silent and dormant for a while. And this was, the waking up of the giant, right? Then you have, actually a lot of the culture, right, turned on Drake during this whole thing. And this has kind of been a celebration of that. Kendrick dropped some, some certain bars that really, turned the culture on Drake in terms of calling him a colonizer and exploiting the idea that Drake is a Canadian. He's not really of this culture, right? He's an outsider coming in and basically putting on blackface to play this act and everything. It's interesting. It goes real deep, but this track was so heavy hitting, and that's without getting to these allegations, even suggesting that Drake is into minors and things like this. This whole thing just felt different, right? And if you've been around long enough, if you've seen your fair share of rap beefs, this was different, right? And some of these tracks really did hit hard. You had whether it's Takeover, right? Or you have Takeover where Jay-Z is calling into question Nas's whole discography, right? You have Real MFGs where Eazy-E is going after Dr. Dre and calling out his masculinity and things like that. You had Dollars and Cents by DJ Quick, which is actually one of my favorite diss tracks, right? And you have DJ Quick calling out MC8, and he never really seemed to recover from that whole thing. Shout out to MC8 though. You had what else? What's another one? I mean, going back to the LL Cool J Cannabis beat, you have some very epic beefs, and then you have Ether, right? You can't mention Takeover without Ether, and Ether was so vicious and lethal that it became a verb, right? You talked about folks getting ethered, right? But none of those obviously resulted in lawsuits. And, one of the other ones that you have to mention is Hit 'Em Up, where, just the way Tupac opens up the track, talking about the late B.I.G's, what he did with his wife, right? And so in each of these tracks, and these are all tracks that you wouldn't necessarily want to have, playing with your mom in the car, right? Or your aunt in the car, something like that. It could be a little awkward and uncomfortable to listen to. But hey, man, this is the game that we're in. But like I said, all of these were tough. Like it'd be rough to be on the recipient side of no Vaseline, right? But none of these ever resulted in litigation, in RICO filings, and in defamation. But here we are with this Drake suit. And so, again, I don't really want to get too much into the artificial inflation of the numbers, because the interesting thing and the ironic thing is, as we hear more industry experts saying that, that Drake may have actually been the beneficiary of that same treatment. So whether it's the bots, it's the payola, or any of that stuff, allegedly, right? All that's, that's big money talk way over my head. But I definitely found that to be ironic that he could have been the beneficiary. It's one thing, when you're up, right? When you're the $1 billion baby, when you're the boy and everything's going your way, it feels real good. But then when that same system that you've been a beneficiary of is turned against you, then that's a little difficult to deal with. And so while it could be seen as, a crusade against the big machine, it doesn't really feel that way because, Drake is, this dude just signed a $400 million deal before, and then, was up for negotiating an even bigger deal. And it's not like, the little guy against the machine, right? This is not that. This just seems more like a personal thing that he wants to, resolve for himself, right? This isn't him fighting on behalf of the little guy. And so with that said, the main thing that I want to talk about is this whole defamation thing, because that is something that you probably thought about, right? Should this be legal? Like, can Kendrick be talking about these things in a track without it being a problem? And it's interesting, man, because when you talk about just even the cover art, right? You look at the cover art and what that means. You look at certain lines, and Kendrick never said directly, you're a pedophile, right? But there's these sort of suggestions. And when we look at defamation and what it means, generally speaking, the law on defamation protects us from having our reputation tarnished by lies being spread about us, right? And so in order to prevail on a claim of defamation, you have to show that there's been a statement made, a statement published about you as the plaintiff, and it has to cause harm to your reputation, and it has to be false. And if we're talking about a public figure, and Drake is clearly a public figure, then you have to prove malice. So it can't just be a negligent slipping out or a negligent putting out of a statement, which just means like you accidentally, put it out. You failed to exercise due care in putting out a statement. Now, when it's dealing with a public figure, you have to show that there's actual malice, which means that you actually knew that the statement was false and you put it out anyway, or you acted in reckless disregard of the truth. And so in this situation, I mean, the $1 million question is, if Kendrick is saying all this stuff in the music, why isn't Kendrick being sued for defamation? And I think the obvious answer to that is, if what he's doing right now in terms of these legal filings is not career suicide, then going at Kendrick Lamar definitely, directly, would absolutely be career suicide, at least as it relates to hip hop and rap. Interestingly enough, I mean, Drake stock is down right now, make no mistake about it. Even just with these filings that he's made, people, even though he's not directly suing Kendrick Lamar, it obviously has to do with Not Like Us, and people are looking at this as the most non-hip hop move made in the history of hip hop. And, and Drake already had a reputation, right, for being soft. Drake's soft as tissue paper, things like that. You had DMX going off on how he didn't like Drake and the reasons why. And I felt like Drake got an unfair shake when it came to that. I never expected Drake to be anything other than what he was, right? If you are looking for somebody to be the gritty, hard gangster, there's enough artists out there to scratch that itch for you. Drake was not that. Drake never was that. It seemed like he, had some pressure to maybe try and be that. But it wasn't really necessary. But along with that reputation, it's like, this is the most Drake thing that Drake would do, right? File a lawsuit after losing a beef in this way. But when it comes down to it, again, like I said, Not Like Us was different because of what was said and the way it was said in. Like, in any of these other diss tracks that I talked about before, you didn't really take seriously what the artist was saying, right? Like, none of it was really taken literally. But this seemed like it was an actual indictment, especially when you look at what Meet the Grams was, right? There was nothing like ha ha kiki about that. This was really like, you are a dark and vile individual. You're disgusting. I hate you. I wish you were never born. In fact, like he says that, right? Isn't he talking about like you something you should have worn a condom, talking about a dentist or what have you. So, man, this was serious. And again, like, when you think about what Drake said about Kendrick, and touching on his, touching on the topic of his kids and his wife in the way and the specific detail, then like I said, gloves come off and you got to be ready for what comes after that. And, Kendrick just never let up. Right. And so when we talk about the elements of defamation, if you are suggesting that somebody is a pedophile, then that's obviously going to be harmful to a person's reputation, right? We as a society are not prepared to sit up and give passes to people who mess with little girls, right? And even saying that may not be entirely true, but I'm looking at the history of some alleged relationships, and I realize, there might be some falsity in that. But I will just say personally, as I listen to Not Like Us and, Meet the Grams, it did make me feel some kind of way about Drake and what Drake the entity means, in hip hop, right? And so Not Like Us definitely harmed Drake's stock, right? If you have a stock, and let's just say in the pharmaceutical industry, you have a stock, or you have a pill, let's just say a weight loss pill that's been crushing it, and then it turns out that FDA catches wind that there's an ingredient in the pill that's harmful, that might cause cancer, right? Once that news is released, or even before that news is released, that stock might plummet, right? Or on the opposite, you're doing the research phase, and the stock's trading at a certain amount, and then it gets FDA approval, stock's going through the roof. Well, in this situation, as a result of Not Like Us and everything that's been going on, Drake's stock is down, and so you can definitely say that his reputation and his reputation has been harmed by this, and he's suffered financial losses as a result of this. And you could just say, listen to and watch and observe how much Not Like Us blew up. You know what I'm saying? You have college marching bands playing this song. You have people, chanting out that A minor part of the song. So many viral videos of people dancing to it and everything. It's just been all over the place, and that's about him, right? And that just really has to be difficult to deal with, especially coming from being, the biggest pop star, the darling of the music world, right? I mean, that's really got to be a challenge to deal with, to have everyone turn on you in that way. And so the interesting element is the false, right? So in order for something to be defamation, it has to be false, right? Truth is an absolute defense to it. And I won't get into all the things that are out there floating that might suggest, Drake's preferences. You can go and look into that yourself. But, that would be something that Drake would have to ultimately prove that what he's saying is false. And, I'm not really going to get into whether he would be able to do that or not. But that's an interesting element that would, come up. And on the other side, for, UMG and these other defendants in the defamation, that's something that will be, interesting for them to analyze as well, because Kendrick hasn't been named, so he wouldn't have to come out and defend himself. But if he were, the interesting thing is, he would have, First Amendment to rest on. And this would be, pretty unprecedented, because we obviously have had lyrics in court over the years. We've had it be the subject of, can your rap lyrics be used against you in court as it relates to, violent crimes and things like that, and drug sales and all of that. I mean, we just had, the YSL RICO situation. We're dealing with Lil Durk's case right now, where they're, using some of these lyrics against him. But this is different, because we would be talking about the context of a defamation lawsuit. And I think one of the things that Kendrick Lamar would be able to say is that, hey, I never directly said that Drake is a pedophile. And, when it comes to hip hop in general and rap, a lot of it is hyperbole, right? None of it is really meant to be taken literally, right? When people are talking about, the shoot 'em up, bang, bang, and I've I was getting it off the boat, right, from Escobar himself and all these different type of things. Like nobody really believes, at least I hope you don't believe this stuff is true, right? And so, so it's not meant to be taken literally. So it's not said as a statement of fact. It's just, it's poetic, artistic license, right? But since he's not being named, like let's look at who is being named. And when it comes to UMG, the idea, and this had to be a serious letdown for Drake because UMG is a entity and there are people. So let's take it off of UMG and just the people that he was dealing with UMG, right? So people that you've sat in boardrooms with and you've celebrated with because you guys have been getting a lot of money. You've been getting millions and billions of dollars together. And for them to essentially turn on you in this way, because make no mistakes about it, like if you have a relationship with this company, and obviously Kendrick has a relationship with them as well, and he puts out a track and you ultimately listen to it and you're like, all right, cool, put it out. If you're Drake, you're going to feel some kind of way about that, right? Like, so you couldn't do me a solid and suggest to him like, hey, maybe you should take that out, or maybe you should edit that, or maybe we should like hold off on putting this out, or maybe, Kendrick, you went too far, or something to stop this nuclear bomb from blowing up on me and just like I'm getting hit with shrapnel months later after the explosion, right? And that's the personal thing of it. And again, as this continues to play in bars and clubs, at sporting events, and now we have potentially the Super Bowl, it just is insane. And I can understand why he would be upset about this situation. And so, but the thing is, UMG, given that they didn't write the song, right? They didn't write the song. They didn't produce the song. They're just a distribution channel, if you will, for getting this out. Like the question would be like, what obligation do they have to, censor and police an artist and say, oh no, you can't do that because it might be offensive to another artist? Like at what point in hip hop history have we had a label do that, right? On the contrary, that would be all the more reason for them to get this stuff out. But I get it, from Drake's perspective, it's personal and it's hurtful. And not only is it hurtful personally, but again, as we relate it to Drake stock, this has sent Drake stock, through down to the basement. And so that's where it gets interesting. And this is where I completely understand where he's coming from, because if he's getting ready to go back to the negotiation table, right? I got $400 million from you guys last time. And you have to understand that if they gave him $400 million, they had to make billions on the back end, right? So you have to get a return on your investment, right? That's, whenever you invest anything, if I'm putting in $10, then I definitely want to get my $10 back, or want to get, I'll leave my $10 in there and I want to get $3 back, or I want to get $1 back, right? Whether it's 10, 30% or whatever your return on your investment is, they put in 400 million and the idea is I want to get billions back. And I'm sure they did get their billions back. And so now when you have Drake coming back and it's like, oh, well, you gave me 400 million this time, or last time, I want $1 billion this time, or whatever it is that he was asking for. Well, yeah, that's when you were hot. That's when you were on top of the world, but your stock is down. And so now, man, you might be like, I don't even know if I can give you the 400 million this time. It might be 200. It might be 150, right? It might be 50. Who knows? Like, again, that's what I'm saying. Like, Drake's stock is down. And if you are really a Drake fan, there are certain Drake fans who anything could come out and that wouldn't sway them one way or the other. And I would say, like, I'm a pretty big fan of his music, of his catalog. Not the later stuff. I think, just artistically, there's a lack of, evolution. But when Drake wants to rap, there's very few that can mess with him. Timestamp Drake is flawless. And like I said, when Drake really wants to rap, like, you know, he's in a class of his own. But man, this is tough for him, and I really don't know what the comeback play is, at least in rap, right? Well, he's proven that he can go into other genres, you know, that Honestly Nevermind stuff. I know that, you know, that wasn't getting bumped in the hood, but I can definitely guarantee you that, you know, poolside parties, whether in Vegas or around the world, that was getting played. You know what I'm saying? And so he's got other lanes that he can move into. He could probably move into softer R&B type stuff. There's a lot of different lanes that he can go into, but in terms of rap, it might be a rap. It could very well be a rap, especially with this lawsuit being filed. But I'm just gonna say, you know, to have your stock tanked, and have this company have had an opportunity to stop this and not do so. Man, I don't know if he would ultimately, if his lawsuit would survive if filed, but there's something to be argued there. But the interesting thing, and this is, you know, going back to it being false, you know, UMG and their, you know, the representatives can say, well, we don't know it was false, right? When it comes to these allegations, they say, hey, we know, and I don't know how personally they know him. They say, hey, we know him, but we don't know him like that. You know, we don't know. And so that's definitely something that they would be able to fall back on, and something I would imagine if the lawsuit got that far, they'd say, well, you know, we weren't acting in reckless disregard of the truth because we really didn't know what the truth is. And so, and it's not our duty to be a filter or, you know, a block for, you know, against our artists and restricting what our artists say. But just an interesting situation. And I don't wish anybody wrong or wish anybody harm. I do hope he does, you know, come back from this whole thing. And I hope that he takes advantage of the time and actually, you know, focuses on the art. It really seemed, you know, and I think it's really difficult to manufacture hunger, right? You sign a $400 million deal. I think it can be really difficult to be hungry enough to put together top quality rap music. But hey, man, if he can find his way and make a comeback, then that would be cool. But yeah, it's an interesting situation. This is unprecedented. We'll see if this actually gets filed as a lawsuit, because like I said, we're just in the pre-filing stage in order for him to get, you know, information to determine whether he'll actually file these lawsuits. But what did you think about this situation, man? Do you think that he has a claim in terms of, you know, his stock being tarnished, you know, by Kendrick, by UMG, by these other entities, or you think this is just the softest move, the most non-hip hop move ever, and he just, you know, should have taken his ball and gone home and taken the L and, you know, dust yourself off and come back next year or whatever you try to do? You know, let me know in the comments below. But if you got something out of this video, show me some love, hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you never miss a new video when it drops. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace.